Well, he's been on the show before, but it was in kind of a different fashion. I think maybe in COVID, and he's helped me at the Sarnia Sting and we're going back. We were just talking before we got started. If you don't recognize him, now you'll know him. Liam Henderson, thank you so much for...
Thank you, Dave. An honest pleasure.
Yeah, right. Well, it's good to see you and sit down in person. I know it's been a little while, but we see you online, and there's just... I don't know if an hour is going to be enough to talk to you.
Well, I think an hour will be a good amount of time. I don't usually get to talk for that long, so it's always fun when I get to, talk for that amount of time.
You've got a lot to say, I know.
But
we were just talking about how we first met, and that would have been like, what were we saying, 2017?
That would have been around there, so I would have been turning 10 at that point, and I think it would have been either... doing some Pacers stuff.
You came on and co-hosted commentary.
Co-hosted commentary. Yeah, I actually it was funny. I don't know if that was I don't think it was that game. I think it was different. That they're in overtime, right? And the Pacers scored a goal in overtime, and I was like, oh, it's the overtime goal, and they win. But I didn't actually know that in lacrosse and in the junior C league anyway, and probably in other leagues too, in overtime it's like old-fashioned hockey. It's not sudden death.
Right.
You play the full period.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that, and so that was learning the hard way about the rules of lacrosse, I think.
But you were well, you taught me a lot, because the joke is still, I don't even know how to spell sports. I'm an entertainer and a talker, but you came, I remember, you were all prepared. I'll have to dig up the picture. You had the tie on.
Yeah.
And you were going all professional. That was something you wanted to do at the time.
Yeah, it was. I was really interested in sports broadcasting, and of course, over these few years, things change and plans change, and maybe sometime in the future I could dabble in it locally, but I wanted to do it maybe on the national level, but I don't really do that now. However, that being said, for the last 4 years, I've actually worked as a crew member with Sarnia YourTV for the Sarnia Sting games, and I've done that since grade 9, and it's a fantastic experience. I've worked with camera, I've followed the action, the end shot of the ice, as well as following the action on camera too. Yeah. I've done a little bit of audio, but not much. Some mixing. It's a very interesting machine. Graphics, using graphics software. The actual Ontario Hockey League package made it sort of, in cooperation with, Coach Co YourTV. It's fantastic. And replay as well, which not only do you get to show the fans at home the action, working, with the producer, you also... they do mixing in the arena as well. I've met the person who's in charge of that.
Right.
And how they work that is they send the feed over to YourTV, so the replays actually play in the arena as well. So the fact is that I've managed to volunteer, and my work has been shown to, thousands at a time. So, it's really interesting. It's not what I thought I would be doing at this point when I was, younger, but I'm really happy by how that all turned out, and I would say if anybody's interested in getting some volunteer hours and maybe more, YourTV is a great place to do it. It's really interesting work.
And I know you're a real detailed guy person, right?
Yeah.
I know that, and actually Terry and I have talked about you doing that. And
for sure.
You're there to give the best production value you can. To give the fans the experience.
Yeah, because it's about the fans, right? You have thousands in the arena and thousands watching at home, but a lot of people don't realize that it's not just there; it's also the visiting teams as well. So you have markets as small as Owen Sound, and it's markets as large as the Greater Toronto area, and they're all tuning in. If they're on Cogeco or if they're on the Rogers TV network, they get that coverage. So really, it's the fact that I've been able to do stuff that's been seen by people, as close to home as, maybe across the street and as far away as, the Ottawa area.
Yeah.
That's, really fulfilling and very interesting work as well. And just being able to have that opportunity has been wonderful.
Awesome. Let's back up to your younger years. Again, we'll go around to when I first met you. I'm trying to remember exactly how we first met, but...
I think I'm not 100% sure either, but I want to say it would have been at a Sting game. My parents saw you around and they go, hey, why don't you talk about the Sting a little bit? And
I remember you come in and did some co-hosting with me on there. And
those would have been 2017. So that would have been after the actually, no, I think it would have been during the Fazio, Kairu, Ruzicka, Rimshaw era, which,
You've got a great memory.
Yeah.
Is that a photographic memory?
I don't know. Well, that specifically is just, being interested in the Sarnia Sting and the Ontario Hockey League for a while. And never would I have thought, looking back at the history of the Sarnia Sting, the history of the team is not as accomplished as maybe some other franchises in the area, such as the London Knights and the Windsor Spitfires. But those two runs, 2016, 2018, those were great teams. They had sort of the same core. And in 2018, they won that playoff round for the first time in 2018. That was considered huge. I don't think anybody expected that 5 years later you'd have the 2023 team, which contained homegrown players such as Burke and Voigt, and I mean Dylan Sika going absolutely feral on the trade block, getting people removing assets such as Max Nemestikov and Porter Martone, who is now a member of the Flyers, and Angus McDonough in exchange for these players who are now in the National Hockey League, like guys like Luca Del Belbaluz and Del Mastro and Pastajov, and that team was really what I think got the city into the Sting like it really hadn't since the 90s.
Yeah, right.
They went to the conference final, and it would have been great anyway if there was just a conference final. The fact that they were playing against the London Knights, I think, just got Sarnia through the roof, because obviously it's sort of the main talk of the town whenever London comes in, and it's always sold out when they come in. And then you have the playoffs on top of that. That series went to 6 games, and I think a lot of Sting fans are going to remember that series for a while.
We're going to see. There's been a lot of changes there.
Oh, absolutely.
Now,
there's nobody. There's really nobody on that team anymore. But I think this year, I think they're going to be a good team. I think they're going to be tough to beat. I think really it's up in the air who is going to be a real contender. But I think the Powers and the management have really tried to size up the team, get bigger players, get guys who play across ice, of course, with guys like, Brenner Lamons, I believe he is. Certainly somebody who, they really wanted to prioritize getting a player like him who's, really focused on size and hard work, and really the blue-collar player that, old-fashioned hockey fans really look for in, their eyes test. They go, oh, he works hard, he goes into the corners, I want that guy on my team, which, I think that and a little bit of the skilled players like Diorio and Edwards, I think that's a good balanced team.
All right, well, we'll see. Let's boy, we're going to have you back at the Sting and do some of that talking.
it would be great. I've done volunteering, so I've seen a lot of their games the last 4 years. So I've seen them in their highs, I've seen them in their lows.
You could definitely make me look great.
You're great as it is. You've been following the team
Thanks.
for I don't know how long, but
I've
it's
been there 10
pretty
years
long.
now.
Yeah, 10 years. So
let's back up, Liam, and let's get away from the Sting for a bit. And when you were younger, you helped me out with some announcing at the Pacers and stuff. But I think something that was really notable at a young age was Canada's Smartest Person Junior. Did I say that right?
Yeah, it is Canada's Smartest Person Junior.
There was a moment in there that I want to reflect on, and I know I know Mayor Bradley actually spoke very highly of this moment. That there was a girl beside you, and she was frustrated, and at this point you're competing really hard for the spot.
the last spot.
And you reached over to her basically with your words and said, "You got this, relax, you can do it." and that spirit of helping your opponent. I think a lot of people went, wow. Like, most people might have stood back and went, okay, I hope she doesn't get it because then that means I win, or right? Where did that come from?
Well, I don't know. It just, I'm a competitor, and, I saw my opponent. I just remember my dad telling me, stay calm, can't think if you're not calm. So I saw her like that, and I just told her, I don't think there wasn't really like a purpose in me that's like, yeah, okay, I gotta do this, right? I'm just like, that's just instinctually go, okay, I see, it's, everybody wants a fair fight, so I'm like, stay calm, you can't think if you're not calm, you got this. She ended up getting the next 3 challenges, and so, I was out. Again, like it's sort of instinctual. It's just sort of something that, I don't like to see people upset. I think that's just sort of a simple mantra. I don't like to make it too overcomplicated. That's just sort of how I did it, I guess.
Yeah. Good for you for doing that. I know the mayor recognized that, and a lot of people saw that, and it was talked about on the news, etc. Let's talk about, let's fit mom and dad into this conversation.
Okay.
You've learned a lot from them.
Oh yeah.
Who's the one, or is it both, that has taught you, that type of philosophy that you were just sharing, about, helping your opponent kind of thing? Where did that come from?
Well, I think sort of, in general, the things that I've learned and the sort of wisdom that I think I've gained is a collection of both. I think there's no doubt that, I wouldn't be the person who I am without both of their wisdom and their support and their care over the years. Mm-hmm. As I mentioned, that was, my dad's advice that I shared to my opponent. But either way, even still to this day, I'm an 18-year-old. Obviously, I haven't figured everything out.
I'm 56. I haven't figured everything out.
Yeah. So, and I mean, I always ask them, for advice about certain things. I let them know, hey, I'm feeling down, and they help me out, and it's absolutely huge for any young person to have those supports. So I think it's nothing but gratitude from there for my parents.
Yeah, you're close to both of them.
Yeah, I am very close.
But do you, as a typical child, would you, growing up, would you go, I'm going to ask mom because I know she'll say yes, I'm not going to ask dad because he'll probably say no, or vice versa? Did you ever do that?
No, because I ask one and they say, if they say yes, you go, okay, I'm okay with it. Maybe ask the other if it's okay, and I ask both of them. They're like, yeah, okay. So then I do that, and if not, they, we work it out, and it turns out okay. I like input from both.
You love to learn, don't you?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff out there. I think I've sort of done well in school because I found in general I find learning things in that sort of environment to be interesting, and outside of it too, I think is really nice. But I have sort of different interests, and I think that sort of helps because it keeps options open, but it sort of harms in that, okay, I could go any one of these ways and I have to choose one before I turn 18. It's really difficult, but I hope that I'm on the right track right now.
Yeah. And what your parents' background? What for work? What do they do?
Both of them were sort of in the STEM fields. My dad is currently a reliability analyst at Nova, and although he started out in instrumentation, so I talked to my mom about this, and she sort of puts in this analogy where in instrumentation, you look at this machine, and if something goes wrong, you ask, okay, why did it go wrong? And I think, Dad's very, kind of that basis of a person. He goes, okay, what happened here? And, he talks to me about that, and I think that's really interesting. My mom was, I believe, I'm getting the terms mixed up, either a technologist or a technician. She was very interested in math and physics and chemistry and all that. So she went to college. Both of my parents went to college, dropped out, and then went back. I believe I don't know how many, either 2 or 3 times. And so, I think what's great about them is they had a vision. They lived for a while after they dropped out of college, and then they went back and go, okay, I want a life that's more interesting and allows me to be relatively better off. And when I came along, my mom, she quit her job so she could help me out, and so infinite gratitude for that.
So you had a full-time mom.
Yeah, she used to stay at home, and she says that she enjoys it. So, and it brings her joy. So that's really what you like. My dad, on the other hand, well, sometimes at work, not so much. But really, that's the kind of that thing about jobs, is that there's always drags in every job, and it really varies. But he's making the income. He says, and he is going to be retiring very soon, 2026. He will be done, ready, so that he, said he, I don't know if maybe I should be telling this, so don't tell anybody at Nova, but he wants to get out before the next shutdown, because it's just kind of long working hours and blah, So that's,
don't tell anybody who's watching.
Yeah, there you go. So my dad doesn't lose his job a little early. He needs his pension. He needs to figure that out.
Do you have a sense of humor?
Yeah,
Is it
I'd
dry?
Like to think so.
Are you the dry sense of humor, or are you the out there? What's your sense of humor?
I'm sort of a variety of senses. I think it's whatever comes into my head. Sometimes.
Do you like to give mom and dad a hard time?
No, it
like in a fun way.
Well, I mean, maybe, but I don't do so.
They're outside right now. They left the room, so they can't defend themselves. Back to the smartest person adventure, I guess.
Yeah.
Are you still in touch with any of the people that you were on the show with?
It's been very difficult. I don't think I've contacted any of them in years. I maybe one, the winner I've talked to on social media maybe once in the last year. Right. But other than that, our lives have gone completely different ways. So we don't talk to each other anymore. I mean, in 2028, if there's something like a 10-year reunion, I'll be the first to go, all right, yeah, cool. I'll make the trek. Right. But there haven't been, a lot of communications.
What was the? I know you had. They had a party for you at. What was it?
That would have been
Stokes Inland or Stokes by the Bay.
Stokes by the Bay, which became Big Family, which is now closed up.
I remember coming there. I left a Sting game to come and watch.
Oh wow!
You were there and running around, and we've got some mutual friends that were there as well. Was it hard? You had to sign an NDA, or you weren't allowed to? You knew the results of the show. You weren't allowed to tell anybody what the results were. Was that hard for you to keep a secret?
Well, I keep secrets pretty well. Yeah. I'd like to say. I mean, I don't with my family, of course. I'll take the Schulich as an example. We decided, okay, well, before the press release, we're probably going to keep it quiet. So the only ones that I told were my parents initially, and then also my my reference letters, who, by the way, Madame Natalia Farrar and Miss Stephanie Mills provided outstanding references for that scholarship, and I owe them the world for their support throughout that process, because it wasn't just that scholarship, it would have been others, but getting the Schulich really meant a lot. So
why?
Well, for one thing, it's $25,000 for 4 years over the course of 1 year, and then repeated for the next 3. So that'll help pay tuition and rent, of course.
It's $25,000 a year.
Yeah.
So essentially, 4 years. So you're essentially getting $100,000.
Yeah, it is $100,000 scholarship. And so in that case, some of that RESP and whatever I collect from maybe landing a job in between can go towards grad school, which I do plan to pursue based on, I've done some research on career options, and that looks like it might be, of course, a good return on investment, especially in the sciences these days. So, that's kind of really why being awarded that scholarship was so important.
Yeah. And you must be excited to go.
Absolutely, yes.
And what exactly are you taking?
So I'm going to McMaster University. I think the campus culture is fantastic, really aligns with my personality. I think it's the right mix of social, cooperative, as well as hardworking, studious students. There are a lot of smart people that go to McMaster. Some of the smartest students in Canada go to that school, and I think for good reason. But the program specifically that I'm interested in going into is called Honors Integrated Science. So the program is structured so that there's a common curriculum of mathematics, physics, chemistry, the life sciences, earth sciences, and psychological sciences. So in that way, I get essentially all the important scientific disciplines. And I get to take all of them because, it's really difficult for me to leave one because I believe I have strengths in all of them and, variety of different learning styles that are involved. And as well, I was very impressed. I talked to a variety of students. The skills development is a huge part of the program, something that you don't get in very many standard programs that really set McMaster apart. They're well known for their pedagogy and how they teach students. I think that's more of a health sciences thing, but still integrated science is one of those, competitive to get into programs. But you have that, as well as the amount of opportunities for research projects. So you start year one, you dip your toes in the water, see the research process in various different scientific disciplines, and then you start to branch out second, third, and fourth year and get more independent, and you write a thesis in fourth year. So and you get credit for it. So really it's something where, if I want to show somebody that I would be a valuable asset as a public or private researcher, R&D analyst, I can point to those experiences in my undergraduate to show that I have the foundations for those skills. So I just think that it's a wonderful program to get into. One drawback that I have heard, a couple, you don't get to do co-op, although you do get to do experiential education with regards to research, so there's that. Not too big of a deal, as I said, with the experiential learning. But also, it's a program where it's kind of tough to. It's a tough workload, but you do get used to it based on the students that I talk to. Now, keep in mind, based on my schedule and my interests, I was sort of pigeonholed into taking a linear algebra course year one, which is fairly difficult. But I think that this is honors integrated science sets you up for a master's degree. It is made in such a way where just getting a bachelor's, just getting that honors integrated science isn't something that, a lot of people do. A lot of people, are either choose or are sort of coerced along to get a master's in order to get the employment opportunities that they're specifically looking at. But I think today in science, if you're interested in more of those, a senior position at, a scientific or research agency, that's kind of where you have to go. So there's a saying, champions do just what needs to be done, even if they don't like it, right? So there's a little bit of that along the way. Absolutely.
You really, and I know Mom and Dad have helped you with this, but it's enjoyable to listen to you talk, because you've obviously sat down, whether it's with a pen and a paper or whatever, and put a lot of thought into your life, your career path, your hopes, your dreams.
Yeah.
You've got a plan, and I'm sure you realize, like, the plan doesn't always just go in a straight line.
No, it doesn't.
But you've really put a lot of thought into this, right?
And I think that's necessary. You know, I remember when I was, you know, around the time I was on Kid as Smartest Person Junior, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to explore my options. I'm either going to go to a broadcasting school, such as, you know, what was then Ryerson or Centennial College in Toronto, become a sports broadcaster working with, you know, either Rogers or Bell. And then also go, okay, well, I have an interest in politics, and generally, you know, the way to go is to enter law. So, like you said, specifically constitutional law. So it's like, okay, where would I go from that? And then around the time I was 7th, 8th grade, I realized that, you know, math and scientific subjects were really my strength. And I realized that, you know, if I want to make, you know, really an impact through my profession, you know, I can really utilize my strengths, I would argue, the best in those fields. That's why I'm sort of going into that with an interest in, you know, finding ways to integrate that into solutions that, you know, problems that, you know, affect everybody, and ways to, you know, improve the world. So I think that's really where it comes in. And, you know, I think in an ever-changing world, you know, it's good to have a plan. I like to be prepared. So I go, okay, in high school, I'm in grade 9, right? In grade 10, 11, 12, what courses do I need to take to get to the plan? And I've mostly followed through with that plan, and it's worked well, which is good. I'm thankful for that. And it doesn't work for everybody. You know, somebody has a plan, you know, they want to go here, but then they realize, okay, well, maybe there are some limitations here, so they change their plan, and it works out okay. But for me, it's been relatively smooth sailing. We'll see how university goes, but, you know, I might change my mind on what I want to be, say, 5-10 years down the road.
Well, we figure it out as the experience goes along.
Of course.
But you, in all of this, like, we're talking education plan, I mean, a lot of people don't. Even adults that I know aren't putting as much, even a quarter of the thought that you've put into things. And I know Mom and Dad have taught you well to do that.
Yeah.
And you've been good at listening and taking their advice. What do you do for fun?
Well, a variety of things. I, you know, enjoy listening to music.
What kind of music do you like?
Well, you know, to be completely honest, the same sort of genres that my dad enjoyed when he was, you know, around my age.
Pink Floyd?
Yeah, that was, yeah, certainly. I do have a lot of their actual physical vinyl records downstairs, actually. I think they have a really unique sound. They have a really unique band dynamic, and, you know, I've always enjoyed their music. I'm more of sort of the classic rock type. I'm interested in, you know, the grandeur of it. You know, I'm more of a progressive fan than anything else, really, and you know, but it's not just that, of course. I enjoy other elements of sort of diverse, you know, dating back to, you know, the mid-'60s, late 60s, all the way up to, I would argue, the 80s, sometimes even the 90s.
Are you an Elvis Presley fan?
Presley, I don't listen to a lot of Elvis. I will admit, but yeah.
Wrong answer. No,
yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it is the wrong
When
answer.
you say, no, it's not. I'm just giving you a hard time. When you say classic rock, who would you identify that you listen to as classic rock?
Classic rock is a very broad label, I would say.
So who do you like in that genre?
I've said Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people associate Led Zeppelin with that.
Okay.
I think you have more of a hard rock influences, such as Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Black Sabbath. I would argue is more hard rock, maybe more on the metal side of things, as they, you know, debuted around 1970. And then also a band that I've taken a liking to, going through a deep dive on their material, Queen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, from, I would say, 1973 to 76, I think. A lot of their material is forgotten by mainstream. Now, keep in mind, everyone knows, Wayne's World, Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah.
It's familiar. We Will Rock You, of course, with the stomp, stomp, clap dynamic. But I would say in their early years, they're an interesting band in that I think they reflected what was popular at the time. Sort of the David Bowie, the Elton John. What can I say? The Deep Purple, the Who, Led Zeppelin. And really, they took a lot of those influences and they really combined them into what was really their own unique sound. And actually, if I may recommend, their second album is really, it's well mixed, everything flows well, variety of styles, They take a liking to very melodic lines, sort of like bands such as Deep Purple, who, if you look up videos of John Lord doing, classical music and just him on the Hammond organ, it's wow, he's talented, right? They really were influenced by a lot of, what was popular in the early 70s, especially in Britain, and the way that they integrate, glam rock, hard rock, progressive, it's something that could potentially be imitated. You can try, but I don't think anything that'll ever,
they're
be matched,
unique for sure. And they broke a lot of rules too in the music world.
Of course.
Bohemian Rhapsody alone was like, I don't know, it's 7 minutes or whatever.
6-7 minutes, yeah.
Right, and they just don't do that. It won't play on the radio and all that. But what do you think it is, talking about that music, and we'll go specifically to Queen, what do you think it is about them? Like you talked about their music at the time, but what has made them the world's greatest band, that they still exist and are alive today, even to somebody like yourself at 18 years old? What's kept them going alive?
It's tough to say. I'm sort of different from maybe a mainstream listener.
Yeah.
I think a lot of Queen fans will tell you that, if you want a real good Queen, if you want a real album that not a lot of people recognize, of course, A Night at the Opera is universally recognized.
For sure.
Not as much so A Day at the Races. It's not very much of a progressive album as I like them, but I would argue maybe my favorite album that the band has produced because it's very consistent and they have a variety of styles. One song is derived from hard rock, one is more glam and more piano oriented, and then it keeps alternating. And I think really what has contributed to their success is that all 4 members of the band have various strengths. Of course, Freddie Mercury with the voice and his songwriting. I think it can be argued that Brian May is the best songwriter in that band.
Oh yeah,
because he's a very smart man. He's an astrophysicist. The themes on his songs are range from stuff like Tying Your Mother Down to Immense Loneliness While Staring at the Moon. By the way, both of those songs are on the same album, A Day at the Races. And his guitar work, his melodic work is just absolutely incredible. The way that he has developed this sort of unique style to him and him alone, sort of like how David Gilmour has his unique style, or a Jimi Hendrix, for example, or even a George Harrison, right? Roger Taylor, of course, the force behind the drums, he contributes a lot. A recurring theme is, about youth, going back to the good old days. But a lot of his songs are about, maturity as well.
Right.
And so he contributes a lot as well. And the long lost and forgotten bassist, John Deacon, of course, he's probably most well known for his bass line to Another One Bites the Dust, which I will admit, that song, not a favorite of it. It seems kind of more stripped down. It doesn't really seem like what Queen would, really be interested in making, right? But again, his contributions as a bassist to making, the songs rich are very, important. And, he created some of the more cherished hits. He was definitely a decent pop writer as well. So everybody wrote, everybody created the music, and I think it was really that group dynamic that
it was definitely a multifaceted
absolutely
group.
Yes.
What about there's a point though where like, you know, we always want the classics. Like if we go to a concert, we want to hear the Bohemian Rhapsody, blah, 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 blah. We know what we want to hear. But there was a point, though, I don't know, I guess you call it a turning point where we saw something really different with Queen, like Crazy Little Thing Called Love.
Yeah, so
that was more of a we need to put some.
Yeah,
I felt like it was like, well, we just need to put something out there.
Well, the thing about the game is I think they had a new producer, right? So I think that was, you know, he was working with, I think it might have been Billy Squire, the same producer, but I could be wrong about that. But yeah, it was different. There are some good songs off of that album that sort of reminisce sort of the earlier tracks, but you know, a lot of it was sort of, you know, in that time they went, okay, you know, they didn't really put as much, you know, time into making the songs and still be popular, which I guess, you know, it's all right to some people, but to others, you know, it's sort of like, I don't know, I've heard some people who are interested in Metallica go, oh, everything was great until the Black Album, and then they became, you know, a more popular band, and they sold out, right? I think.
What does that mean, to sell out? I get paid for what I love to do?
It seems to sell out, I guess, is kind of controversial. It's kind of difficult where, you know, it's really like, okay, you know, we're popular now. We're popular. The expectation is we make good music for the radio because there's a lot of pressure, I think, and that contributes a lot to where artists go, okay, we want to change our music. But keep in mind that not every, you know, artist goes through that. Like, you know, Led Zeppelin, from the first singles off of there all the way up to, you know, when the drummer John Bonham died, they sort of had this same sort of flexibility while also staying true to their sound. With the Beatles, it was the other way. From 1960 until 64, they had this sort of boy band sound. They were very popular, and then, you know, they started to reach into more artistic ways with Rubber Soul, and then Revolver came out, and that just shook the ground. Nobody saw that coming, and I think that's really where a lot of people have identified, okay, this is where the musicality of the Beatles and their influence really starts. And there's that album, there's Sgt. Pepper and the White Album, which I'm not too much of a fan of. I think there's a lot of filler on there, but you have albums like Abbey Road, which, I mean, again, completely rewrote what you define as popular music, right? That, you know, you had the medley, you had, you know, the variety of different styles, and I think you really started to see that emerging from that time. So,
what about our music today? Is there anything that you're listening to today?
Admittedly,
are you a Swiftie?
I will admit this is one of my faults. I don't really branch out a lot. I don't really listen to some of today's music, but I think people recognize.
I don't know that's a fault.
I guess some people, you know, I think what you look at with the people who review music online, there's a certain type of people who really, you know, pay attention to music and all that, and they are this certain type of person, and they can be critiqued, of course. But I think, you know, a lot of people, like what the mainstream pop, they're not as, you know, interested in that. You know, the same types of people go, wow, this Pink Floyd album is great. You know, they're looking more at, you know, independent, sort of lowbrow types of music. Very interesting music too. I think Trout Mask Replica, for example, is a record that I listen to. I'm like, what is going on here? But it's considered, but it's well thought of by a lot of music fans. You go, they're really pushing the boundaries of what, you know, music really is. And I think there's that group, and there's people who just, you know, enjoy music. And I think there's no right way to listen to music. Right? And I think, you know, sure, there's a lot of commercialism in music today, but I feel like that's always been the case.
It's a business, right?
Of course.
It is, for sure.
Of course.
Do you play video games or anything like that? Are you Fortnite in it, or? Fortnite
is a game that I have not played in years.
Yeah.
I think
Minecraft's pretty big right now.
Well, yeah, it is. I think really what about Minecraft is during the pandemic, you know, a lot of people were shut down, and, you know, didn't have anything else to do, and I think that's where that game got a resurgence in popularity. And of course, recently with the Minecraft movies, I think something where a lot of people found a little bit of interest in. I think
a resurgence of the
thing, and it's sort of what's interesting about that movie is it's sort of compared to the Gen Z's Rocky Horror Picture Show in a way, where you have people doing the time warp, you have you have people saying all the lines because it's.
I did it once.
So,
it's messy. It's messy to go to a Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yeah, it's messy to go to a Minecraft movie shooting. It's got a little bit of controversy for that, for whatever. But I think regular people they just go, they enjoy it for the time because they see the movie, they go, wow, this movie is not good, but you're just there to have a good time,
right? Okay.
And just and enjoy it with others, and just
and do you do that? What about friends? You have friends that you hang out with and
I would hope
around with,
But yeah, I do. We do sort of that stuff whenever I'm available.
Right.
During the school year, it's tough to get out.
Yeah.
Without finishing all my obligations, everything that I need to do to make sure that I stay on track with my courses.
Yeah.
But I have good friends and they understand me, and I've got with regards to friends, I've got a few good close friends that I like to hang out with.
Yeah.
I have a lot of people that I know kind of well or well in my school, and I like to be a friendly face and support my friends wherever they go. And I think that's really where a lot of people they put my faith in me over the years, and I'm really grateful for them.
Yeah. What about let's shift gears here again, and that's I'm so enjoying this conversation. If you're looking at the expression on my face,
me too.
I'm just listening to you is just wonderful. To your knowledge of so much, especially the music. You're tugging on my strings there, but what about can we talk about the world? Like what's happening in the world? We don't want to go down any rabbit holes or anything, but do you follow along at a federal level and a local level, or how
I try to. I think I try to. I look at the news, the news and the sports and all that, and follow what's going on.
How are we doing?
Well, I think it's a loaded question. Of course, it's a loaded question. I think that there's this book that I read by Peter Turchin that talks about how American society has evolved over the years and looking at well-being, and in historical societies there have been cycles of well-being, and it really relates to sort of the power structures, because for example, and this is something that I got to talk about this for an English project, and I think most of the room was wondering what the hell was this guy talking about, right? But I don't know. So anyway, during times when there are, I don't want to say favorable economic conditions, but right now I think we're at a time where there's a lot of division, and I think that has to do that over the last, say, 40 or 50 years, relative quantitative standards of living have dropped. And I think you're starting to see, I think the theory states that, there are these cycles, but if you look as well as the dynamics of what you consider to be elites in society, there's this interesting dynamic where if there's elite competition between each other, everybody wants to rule the world, as in a Tears for Fears song,
Right.
But I think there's a lot of that competition, and of course, you have the elites, the current establishment, and the counter elites, people who want to replace them with themselves as the rulers. And I think for a lot of history and a lot of different societies, that's sort of how that works. And I think it's important that through all the chaos and through all the difficulty, I think the important thing is we understand that we're not gonna agree with each other. I think we want to be. I think the key thing is to be as objective as possible. Stay vigilant. make sure to talk to each other, and be.
We're not communicating enough with each other?
Well, you know what? We're communicating too much with each other, and we're communicating not enough with each other. I think,
Too much?
Well, too much as in, social media, I think, has a lot of information at your fingertips. But, it's a domain that's, very hard for someone or something to regulate.
Well,
so you have to be very careful.
Let's talk about social media there. I don't like interrupting you because I'm learning so much, but you are not on Facebook.
I'm not. I don't think a lot of other young people are either.
Yeah.
It's more.
Are you on Instagram?
So Instagram is where generally I follow other people that I know, and as well stay tuned for little updates, sort of like how I do the news. Now I follow the news for more formal stuff, but there's forums.
So you are on social media, just not Facebook.
Yes.
Okay.
Specifically, Instagram is the main one.
TikTok?
No, I don't. I don't use TikTok. It's sort of a video sharing website. I've never, really seen a use, because you can't use TikTok to talk to people. I think that's the key thing, and I think mostly everyone has either Instagram or Messages, and I started using it when I was, in grade 9 because our student council chats were in there. So, I've kept that, and it
So
works
did you
okay.
choose to not be on Facebook, or did your mom and dad or you say,
I've made that choice.
Social media is too distracting for me, I need to stay focused?
Well,
Was that a concern?
Social media enough, like what I have right now is distracting enough. I look at it and go, okay, yeah, there's these people, and I get to talk to people. I think that's the main purpose of why I like to use social media, and I think that's the case for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure.
But I noticed a lot of different people. It's different, opinions, and some people,
everybody's got an opinion.
Yeah, well, yeah, of course, but it depends on how you share that opinion. You want to make sure that you're not just saying stuff.
Are we too? Let's talk about that. Because we all have opinions.
Yeah.
And I think because of social media now, everybody's got an opportunity to express their opinion. But are we trying to? Do we base what we're trying to do or accomplish in something, whether that be politics or in our families or locally, are we trying to push our opinions rather than the facts? Like, sometimes people say something, you go, well, that's your opinion, but that's not actually the facts here. Like Ben Shapiro would say, facts don't care about your feelings.
Well, of course, that's. Do
you agree with that statement?
I agree with that statement. Now how you apply it is different. I think, I watched Neil deGrasse Tyson on a master class, and he was talking about this idea of objective truth, wherein there are some things that we as society have observed, we've tested, and we know, okay, this is true about our world. Now, keep in mind, there are some things that we think about. There are some things we theorize, especially in the past, that we look on now and we go, okay, this wasn't quite right, or sometimes this is downright disturbing, like thinking that, oh well, one race is smarter, more cognitive abilities than the other. That's of course that's not the case. It's been debunked as pseudoscience, but a lot of people use that to sort of justify their belief in that, oh well, we're the superior race, so we might as well colonize. So we do have to be really careful. We have to look at various perspectives on things. We have to make sure that the things that the policies and the ideas that we are creating are indeed based on fact. Specific. Now there are sort of different
Could you give an example of a topic?
Well, I think for example, when you look at economic policy. I think a lot of economists, they can be right, they can be wrong. They have different opinions. Something that, a Keynesian, someone who follows Keynes, will have a different opinion than someone who follows Friedman, who's more of a laissez-faire. right? But I think there are various strengths and various drawbacks to various theories that I think people have. For example, from what I've heard, people say, oh, well, clearly these are all indicators that there's an economic recession that's going to be upcoming. Nobody really knows when an economic recession is going to occur. There's no crystal ball. There's no crystal ball in predicting who's going to win an election, whether it's going to be someone with a certain ideology, right? So I think that's something that we do have to be careful about. But at the same time, I really do think that we need to put a lot more trust in people who have spent a lot of time studying certain things, people who see, okay, there's a pattern here, and there's a decision that's been made here. Maybe this isn't the best way to go. Maybe instead we should provide, for example, if there's this economic system, okay, this government wants to do this action. This could be good for this reason, but also bad for this reason. Is there any alternative that can be better? And it turns out there's not really one golden key to unlock the door to prosperity. I sounded like a poet there. That's wonderful.
No, you're on the right track.
But
so when are you interested in politics? Do you ever see yourself jumping into that world?
The issue about politics is, of course, it's divided today. I have hope that I think there will come a day where it will become gradually less divided, and we'll come into a day where things felt quote unquote normal again, when when the top of the news story was that there's a local squirrel running around, and there's a squirrel with rabies, we have to catch him, right? That'll be top news back in those days. Although I don't know, I don't really have that experience of living in those times as much as I'd like to. But I think what I've been doing a little bit of reflecting, and I think for myself, the best form of politics that I think I could excel in, I think would probably be at the municipal level. Because there's that real connection. Because I do remember. There's that connection to community.
Yeah, I do remember you making the statement one time that
I wanted to be prime minister. Right. Yes. And if I were to enter federal politics, I think it would.
I don't know if mom and dad would let you.
I don't think they would. But I really think the thing about municipal politics, what's great about it, is that you don't have to worry. I like to consider the idea of interest groups. If you want to be a successful politician, you need to appeal at least some of the time to various interest groups. And people are not going to get their way all the time, right? I think, and of course it's an idea of maybe not so much following interest groups as much as it is, stone cold, looking at, experiments that have happened here. Say, for example, okay, let's take this, for example. This province tried this plan to help decrease the amount of drug overdoses. Did it work? In some ways, and in some ways not. So do we implement this policy or do we not? What are the costs and what are the benefits? I think in the end, people are more good people than I think bad people. I think we're all, if we're brought up well with, good values about, we, treat others with kindness, I think we're going to make out okay. But of course, people have had experiences that influence their way of thought, and I think it's hard to get rid of those sort of things. You can try, but there are some negative experiences that people have that, maybe cause them to make unwise decisions in life. But I think, if we can look at it from more of a scientific perspective. I'm more of a science guy, so I know this is going to be sound sort of biased, but I think if we use the scientific method proposed by Francis Bacon, at least in the West, I think we'll get there, right? But that's federal politics. Municipal is a lot more lowbrow. You can meet the needs of your community, and you can really advocate for the needs of your community. For example, I'll take the Line 5 pipeline. there are a lot of issues regarding how are we going to implement this pipeline, how are we going to make it work. But I think, for example, if you're the mayor of a city like Sarnia that relies on the petrochemical industry, you could really put pressure on a government that says, okay, this is an economic investment that, we really need to prioritize, and we really need to find a way to make it effective so that we're not leaving out an interest group, we're not leaving out our community, and, that the community can benefit. Smaller areas like Sarnia may not benefit certain initiatives, so it's up to someone like a mayor or a city councilor to pipe up and go, hey, we need this, right? We need funding from the federal government. We need funding from the provincial government. Speak for who you really know, because as a federal leader, you have to represent a broad coalition of people. I don't know if I'm the type of person who wants to do that. I know the people that live in Sarnia. I know what their concerns are. So I think really it's a matter of confidence that I think, okay, being the leader of a municipality such as Sarnia, or maybe a smaller town, wherever I end up, I think that's the right way to go. And the best part, there are no political parties, so people actually kind of have to do their research, and really they don't have to, and they don't have to abide by a platform, which I think is nice. I think we need politics more like that. So
congratulations on everything. I know there's so much. Sorry we don't have 4 hours to do this, because there's so much more I want to ask.
I don't know if I could do it for 4. I mean, 1 hour went by pretty well.
I think you'd be okay at 4 hours. You could do 2 for sure.
For sure, yeah. So maybe taking a press conference as mayor won't be that hard after all.
Right.
Maybe it will. We'll see.
Look out, Mike.
I've talked to him, and
has he advised you on this?
He's sort of been a bit of an advisor. He's been very, very popular with the community. I've met him. Overall, he's working well. Of course, he's someone that I think a lot of people find to be good. I want to be the type of person where people don't necessarily go I don't necessarily want to be a polarizing figure. I think municipal politics is somewhere where most of the time, of course, there are some shenanigans right now, but I think overall, municipal politics is where people who actually know what the concerns of their communities are. In different polities, in different municipalities, you have people divided up into wards. So, for example, in Toronto, you'd have someone representing an area of Scarborough, area from downtown, maybe so like a
Sarnia.
Yorkdale. Yeah. Here, it's just you represent the whole of Sarnia, and I mean, maybe it would be for the best to divide it up into wards. I don't know how you do that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Districting, that well, but I think on a municipal level, it's to the point where you go, okay, because it's easy to really canvass and go around and go, hey, what are your concerns? And I'll have to prepare for some people to say, look, your policies have been ineffective, they've decreased efficiency, they've made this worse. You have to take it, right? You have to take that criticism. And that's something that I'm growing, and I'm learning to work with, of course.
Well, you're growing, but you're far ahead than some at this point. Let me tell you, and I can't thank you enough for everything you've shared here today.
Mr. Dave Burrows, it's always a pleasure, right?
Well, I appreciate you, and Mom and Dad. Thanks as well.
Oh have to thank the family.
Yeah, thanks to all of you for watching. I really wish we had more time, but I got to cut it here.
Yep.
We're going to talk some more, I know, before I go. But as always, click the like, click the love button, and click the share button. It's the most important button, so we can share Liam's story and everybody else that has here on the show.
Absolutely.
But as always, that's all the time I got for you this week. Have a great week and an even better weekend. We'll see you next time right here on the show. Bye for now.
See ya.
See ya.